Welcome back. It's a neck-to-neck race for governor in Wisconsin this fall, with the candidates meeting for their first and only debate on Friday night. Republican candidate Tim Michels faced off with Governor Tony Evers. Here's a short reel of the highlights.
My opponent is radical on this issue, and frankly, she's radical because it's not consistent with Wisconsin values.
I am pro-life, and I make no apologies for that, but I'll tell you who the real radical is. The real radical is Governor Evers.
What is your prescription for attracting and retaining young adults to our workforce?
We're going to get people off of their couches and get them back to work. We created an entire class of lazy people during COVID.
How should Wisconsin respond to a changing climate?
Instead of blah, blah here, I'm going to talk about our clean energy plan. It is something that's really working well in the state of Wisconsin.
I sat down with Republican analyst Brian Reisinger and Democratic strategist Joe Zepecki after the debate to get their reaction. Here's our conversation. This debate covered some of the predictables, right? We talked about inflation, we heard about crime, we heard about abortion. Was there anything that surprised you? Brian, we'll start with you.
You know, I don't think there were any huge surprises in the sense that I think this race is on a fairly clear trajectory. We've got a question of whether the environment that favors Republicans a bit and Tim Michels' outsider message is going to be enough to, challenge incumbency and ultimately prevail. And I think we largely saw a debate last night where Tim Michels brought that outsider message as a businessman and as a veteran and put that up against, what he thinks are the flaws in Governor Evers' record.
Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I thought the governor did what he had to do, which was, make the case that he's sort of the last line of defense against a Republican legislature that on some top line issues is out of step with the majority of Wisconsinites. Thought the governor defended his record well, got to, the key points about the way that Wisconsin is working, with almost record low unemployment, talked about his investments in public safety and law enforcement that were available under the American Rescue Plan. And I think that was an effective way to sort of counteract some of the 30-second ads that are flooding the airwaves right now.
Let me critique each of your guys real quick, if you don't mind. Brian, your guy has a hard time directly answering a question. We saw that over and over the debate where, a question is asked and Michael doesn't really answer the question with, details or even address the question at all. What's up with that?
Well, I think that part of what we're seeing here is that Republicans are trying to have the conversation that they need to have directly with voters. And the reality is that Tim Michels, being an outsider, has major advantages with voters who want to hear something fresh, different, new. They don't want to hear the same old political stuff. So there are going to be times where a candidate like Tim Michels, who comes from outside that political system, isn't going to be as concerned about what the media wants, isn't going to be as concerned, with all due respect, at what reporters or anchors or moderators want. He's going to be talking about what he thinks the people of Wisconsin care about. And so you're going to see a fair amount of that. I will say that his positions have become clear and crisp, and that he's drawing a clear contrast with Governor Evers, and one that I think that the governor is trying and is going to need to continue to address, which is things like the cost of living, filling up a tank of gas, buying a bag of groceries, and keeping our communities safe. And these are things that you heard Tim Michels speak very clearly and very directly on last night.
Let's talk about your guy. There seems to be trouble sometimes getting thoughts out, stringing together sentences. What should voters take away from that?
Well, I think voters, after 4 years of Governor Evers' leadership, know who the governor is. He's not a silver-tongued attack dog. If you want that out of your state's chief executive, you got to look somewhere else. This is a guy who, is more comfortable in a classroom than he is in a political debate format. Longtime politicians are pretty smooth when it comes to this stuff. I think the governor, reflected who he was and the type of leadership that Wisconsinites have come to expect, which is maybe if he doesn't come across great on TV, they still know they can count on him to do the right thing for the state.
We're in a political climate where I suspect most people at this point, even without the debate, know who they're voting for. You're either on one side or the other. So who is this debate for? Who in each of your camps is likely to be swayed by what they heard last night, Joe?
I hope those undecided voters caught the debate. And if they didn't, hey, it was a Friday night. There were football games going on and activities to get the kids to. But I think that the 100 to 200,000 truly undecided voters in this race will probably find time to watch it back on a stream online. They'll see some news coverage. And I hope that they did, because Brian is right. The contrasts are very clear between these two gentlemen. And so My hope is that a lot of undecided voters watched it because I think Governor Evers did a fine job. But unfortunately, the reality of our politics is a lot of partisans watch this and try to seize on this little slip up of the word, or this answer to this question. That's not particularly healthy for our democracy. These should be for those voters in the middle who want to know the measure of these men before they cast a ballot.
I'm going to take a little heat for agreeing with Joe here on a Saturday morning, but I do want to note that I agree. I hope that the swing vote does tune into the debate. And I do think that that is where debates have an impact, which is at the margins. There are some folks who are going to tune into this who haven't necessarily made up their mind, or who may have views that have a mix of issues in them. And being able to see this debate and seeing so many issues laid out is very useful for voters like that. The other thing that it does is it impacts media coverage going into the home stretch here.
If each of you had to bet your paycheck on what the outcome of this laser thin governor's race is going to be, what do you say?
Joe, you betting your paycheck first, or am I?
Sure. Listen, I think one of the most under-discussed components of the governor's race is the fact that the third-party candidate, even though she has suspended her campaign, is on the ballot. There is a third choice for voters who aren't particularly fond of either party, and when they see another option, may just check that box. So my prediction is that Governor Evers will win, even if he doesn't get to 50%. I think it's more likely that 48 or 49% is enough with the presence of that third party candidate on the ballot.
Yeah, I think Tim Michels is going to win. I think it's going to be an extremely tight race. Predictions are always dangerous in politics, but particularly so in Wisconsin, where we balance on a razor's edge like this. And when you look at this race, the reality is that there are some key fundamentals that are in place. One is that it is an environment that favors Republicans to a degree because people are unhappy with the direction of the state and direction of the country. The polling shows that with 63% of Wisconsinites thinking the state is on the wrong track. So there's that. There's also Tim Michels' outsider message that he's driving, the contrast he's driving with the governor. Now, the flip side of that is that Governor Evers was prepared coming into this general election. He had an immense amount of resources. It seems like he knew what his message needed to be on the airwaves, at least, and they have positioned themselves accordingly. When you combine that with how tight of a state Wisconsin is, the most evenly balanced in the country, in fact, it is going to be an extremely tight race.
And just ahead, EMS services in Wisconsin are in trouble. How voters are being asked to pick up the tab.